Imagine being told your child has only years to live. Imagine watching his face change in ways no parent should ever witness. His skull growing, his features stretching, a body that defied expectations. And then imagine doing the unthinkable, throwing him on the back of a Harley-Davidson and facing the world head-on. This is the story of Roy Lee Rocky Dennis and his mother, Florence "Rusty" Dennis, a woman whose life was as chaotic, fearless, and unconventional as her son's was extraordinary. Hollywood told part of the story, but the truth? Wilder, darker, funnier, and heartbreakingly unforgettable. Life Beyond the Diagnosis, December 4th, 1961, Glendora, California. A baby boy is born to a young woman named Rusty Tullis and her husband Roy Dennis. The baby looks perfectly healthy. 10 fingers, 10 toes, crying, breathing, normal. For 2 years, Rocky Dennis was just another kid growing up in suburban California. And he had an older half-brother named Joshua from his mother's previous marriage. He played, he laughed. Nothing about him signaled what was coming. Then, a routine X-ray changed everything. Rocky had gone in for a tonsillectomy. Standard stuff. The kind of surgery millions of kids go through. But an X-ray technician, someone whose name most of us will never know, noticed something. A slight irregularity in the boy's skull. Something that didn't look right. More tests followed. Weeks of them. Trips to the UCLA Medical Center that became a second home. And then the diagnosis landed like a bomb. Craniodiaphyseal dysplasia. If you've never heard that term before, there's a reason. It affects roughly 1 in every 220 million births. Fewer than 20 cases have ever been recorded in medical history. To say it's rare doesn't even begin to capture it. Here's what the disease does. Calcium builds up in the skull, relentlessly, without stopping. The bones of the face thicken and warp. When the skull swells to twice its normal size, the eyes get pushed outward toward the edges of the head. The nose twists and stretches. And the pressure, that slow, crushing, invisible pressure, pushes down on the brain itself. Doctors sat Rusty Dennis down and told her what to expect. Rocky would lose his eyesight. He'd lose his hearing. The pressure on his brain would eventually kill him. And it would probably happen before his 7th birthday. They gave her son less than 4 years. I'd let that settle for a moment. Your kid is 2 years old. He's running around the house. He's laughing. And a doctor is telling you he'll be dead before he starts 2nd grade. Most parents would have crumbled. Most parents would have wrapped their child in cotton wool and waited for the inevitable. Rusty Dennis was not most parents. She looked at her boy. She looked at the doctors. And she made a decision that would define the rest of Rocky's life. She was going to raise him like a normal kid. No special treatment. No pity. No hiding. When Rocky turned 6, Rusty enrolled him in public school, against the explicit advice of every doctor who knew his case. The schools didn't want him. Administrators tried to push him into special education programs, not because he had any intellectual disability, but because they simply didn't know what to do with a child who looked the way Rocky did. But here's what nobody expected. Rocky wasn't just keeping up with his classmates. He was outperforming them. The kid was sharp, wickedly funny, and socially fearless in a way that stunned everyone around him. He graduated from high school with honors. He collected baseball cards. He dreamed of touring Europe on a motorcycle with his best friend. He was, by almost every measure, a completely normal American teenager, trapped inside a body that the world could not stop staring at. Rusty Dennis, biker, rebel, mother. Now, to understand Rocky, you have to understand the woman who raised him. Because Rusty Dennis was not a character from a Hallmark movie. She was something else entirely. Born Florence Steinberg in Brooklyn, New York, Rusty was trouble from the start, and she'd be the first to tell you that. Kicked out of junior high at 13 for truancy, smoking marijuana and riding with bikers by 14. Dropped out of school at 15 and went to work as a dancer at Coney Island. She married young, a truck driver named Tommy Mason, and had her first son, Joshua. That marriage fell apart fast. She moved to California, married Roy Dennis, and had Rocky. That marriage fell apart too. But somewhere along the way, Rusty found her people. The bikers, the Turks Motorcycle Club. These weren't weekend warriors in matching leather vests. These were hard-living, hard-riding men and women who operated on the fringes of society. And Rusty fit in like she was born for it. See, she was loud, she was profane. She had a drug problem that she fought and often lost to for years. She brought men home, she threw parties, she lived a life that no social worker would have approved of. And she was, in her own chaotic and completely imperfect way, exactly the mother Rocky needed. Because Rusty's philosophy was simple. She once told Rocky, and this is documented, "Everyone can look like anyone else, but no one can look like you." And take pride in that. Think about that for a second. She didn't say, "You're beautiful on the inside," like some hollow greeting card. She told her son that his face, the very thing the world recoiled from, was something to be proud of. That his uniqueness wasn't a curse, it was his. And she backed it up. When school principals tried to segregate Rocky into special education, Rusty showed up and fought until they put him in a regular classroom. Yet when doctors talked about Rocky like he was already dead, Rusty told them to shut up and let her son live. She gave him vitamins and alfalfa sprouts, believing in the power of the body to heal itself. When his headaches got unbearable, those crushing episodes caused by his skull pressing on his brain, she didn't sedate him. She'd sit by his bed and talk him through it, teaching him to use his own mind to fight the pain. Was she a perfect mother? Not even close. The drug use was real, and the chaos was real. But the screenwriter Anna Hamilton Phelan, who wrote Mask, said something that cuts right to the heart of it. She said Rusty was not the PTA Mother of the Year, but she was the perfect mother for Rocky. And in the world Rocky inhabited, a world that flinched when it looked at him, having a mother who refused to flinch was worth more than all the perfection in the world. Hollywood versus the real Rocky. When Mask hit theaters in 1985, it became a phenomenon. Cher won Best Actress at Cannes. Eric Stoltz disappeared so completely into the role that audiences forgot they were watching an actor. The film made over $48 million at the box office and earned a 93% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. But here's the thing about Hollywood. It can only handle so much truth at once. The movie softened Rusty. It softened the chaos, and it changed things that mattered. Start with this. In the film, Rocky's face is disfigured, clearly, disturbingly. But Eric Stoltz, in that prosthetic makeup, didn't look as severe as the real Rocky Dennis did. The real Rocky's skull was massively enlarged. His features were far more distorted than what the screen showed. Hollywood pulled its punch. Then there's the music. Rocky Dennis loved Bruce Springsteen. The Boss was his guy. Director Peter Bogdanovich built the entire soundtrack around Springsteen's music. But Universal Pictures and Columbia Records couldn't agree on licensing. And every Springsteen song was ripped out of the film and replaced with Bob Seger tracks. Rusty was furious. She went on television and said she didn't think her son even knew who Bob Seger was. Bogdanovich sued Universal for $19 million. It took until 2004, nearly 20 years later, for the director's cut to finally restore the Springsteen songs. But the biggest thing the movie missed was Rocky's brother, Joshua Mason. Rusty's first son, or Rocky's older half-brother, doesn't exist in the film. He was erased entirely. In real life, Joshua was a writer living in San Francisco who came out as gay to his mother as a teenager. Rusty, in her own complicated way, supported him. She wanted him to be bisexual so she could have grandkids. She once called him asking him to visit a sperm bank. "She really wants grandkids," Joshua said. I told her, "No way." In 1986, Joshua was diagnosed with Kaposi's sarcoma as a result of AIDS, and he died in 1987 at the age of 32. Rusty outlived both her children. She once said something about that experience that I haven't been able to get out of my head. She said, "People say, 'Oh, it's too bad they died so young.' I say, 'You don't understand. My kids lived every day of their lives, every moment.' The movie didn't show you that. It couldn't. Because that kind of loss, losing both your children, one to an impossibly rare bone disease and the other to AIDS during the height of the epidemic, that level of grief doesn't fit neatly into a 2-hour runtime. Rusty was paid $15,000 for the film rights to her son's story. Most of that money went to pay Joshua's medical bills. She thought the movie was going to be about Rocky, about his courage, about showing disabled kids and their parents that life could still be lived fully. Yet she was surprised and ultimately moved when it turned out to be about her too. She said Cher portrayed her remarkably well, adding her own classic Rusty spin. "I always thought I was perfectly normal, that the rest of the world is nuts." 16 years lived. Let me take you to October 1978. Rocky Dennis is 16 years old. He survived 9 years past the deadline doctors gave him. 9 years of headaches, of stares, of skull x-rays, and hospital visits. By the time he was 7, and he'd already seen an ophthalmologist 42 times, but in the weeks leading up to October, something shifted. The headaches got worse, much worse. Rocky, who had always been the optimist, the joker, the kid who once told a doctor, "I don't believe in being blind," that kid was fading. He started needing a wheelchair. The boy who dreamed of motorcycling across Europe couldn't walk across a room. Rusty knew. Mothers always know. She called the hospital and told them the end was coming. Rocky had made her promise something. He didn't want to be hooked up to machines. He didn't want to die in a hospital, surrounded by beeping monitors and strangers in white coats. He wanted to die at home. He'd said he didn't want to be on one of those machines, Rusty later recalled, and I promised him if the hospital did that, I'd pull the plug. He wanted to die at home. On the night of October 3rd, 1978, Rusty and a group of their biker friends threw a party. Not a somber gathering. It's not a wake, a party. Because that's how Rocky would have wanted it. And that's how Rusty did things. Illustrate a warm, dimly lit gathering. Bikers around a young man, laughter, warmth. At midnight, Rocky woke up with a headache. Rusty went to him. She comforted him the way she always had, talking him through it, sitting beside him, sending him back to his room to rest and make himself well. The same ritual they'd performed hundreds of times before. The next morning, October 4th, Rusty was at her lawyer's office. Rocky was at home. And sometime that day, quietly, without machines, without a hospital ward, Roy Lee Rocky Dennis died. He was 16 years old. His body was donated to the UCLA Medical Center, the same hospital that diagnosed him 14 years earlier would now study him in death, hoping to learn something that might help the next child born with this impossible disease. Legacy of courage and chaos. What do you do with a story like this? Hollywood made a movie. It won an Academy Award for Best Makeup, earned Cher the Best Actress prize at Cannes, and made $48 million at the box office. Audiences wept. Critics praised it. And for a brief window in 1985, the whole world knew Rocky Dennis's name. But here's what the awards and the box office numbers don't tell you. The real legacy of Rocky Dennis didn't live on a movie screen. It lived in moments so small and so human that no camera could ever fully capture them. Start with this. A plastic surgeon once approached Rocky and offered to operate on his face, to reshape it, to make him look closer to what the world considered normal. Rocky was a teenager at the time, a teenager with a skull twice the size it should have been, with features so distorted that strangers flinched when they saw him. Any other kid might have jumped at the chance. Rocky turned him down, and he looked at the surgeon and asked his mother a question that still echoes, "Who will I see in the mirror if I change my face?" Let that sink in. A 16-year-old boy, living inside a body the world could not stop staring at, chose to keep his own face. Not because he didn't know it was different, but because it was his. Then there was Halloween. Every year, Rocky would lead a pack of neighborhood kids on trick-or-treat runs. He'd wear a cheap rubber mask over his face, just like everyone else. But when they'd reach a doorstep and the neighbor would hand out candy, Rocky would pull off the store-bought mask, revealing his real face underneath. Then he'd pretend to struggle with a second mask, tugging at his own skin, acting shocked that it wouldn't come off. The adults would stand there in stunned silence. The kids would howl with laughter, and Rocky would walk away with more candy than anyone. His mother said he pulled that prank every single year, and it worked every single time. That's not a boy defined by his disease. That's a boy who owned his reality and turned it into comedy. At Camp Bloomfield, a Southern California summer camp for disabled children where Rocky later worked as a counselor's aide, the other campers voted him best buddy, most good-natured, and friendliest camper. Not out of pity, because he was genuinely the funniest, warmest person in the room. The screenwriter Anna Hamilton Phelan first encountered Rocky while visiting UCLA's Center for Genetic Research. She described his personality as bright, outgoing, and completely unapologetic. That single encounter set everything in motion. 7 years after Rocky's death, his story became the film Mask. But the legacy doesn't end with Rocky. It carries forward through Rusty, chaotic, fierce, unbreakable Rusty. After the movie, she reinvented herself. She became a drug counselor, using her own battles with addiction to help others fight theirs. She planned to work at the Shanti Project, a support program for the terminally ill, including AIDS patients, a cause that hit painfully close to home after Joshua's death. She took up Buddhism. She moved between cities, between identities, between lives. By 2001, she was working as a psychic counselor, living in a trailer park outside Los Angeles, still riding motorcycles, still refusing to apologize for a single choice she'd ever made. She once said something about energy, about Rocky, that captures exactly how she saw the world. She said, "It has been scientifically proven that energy cannot be destroyed. It simply takes another form." That was Rusty's theology. Her son wasn't gone. He just changed form. On October 14, 2006, Rusty was injured in a motorcycle accident. She died from the resulting infection on November 11th. She was 70 years old. You're a biker's daughter from Brooklyn, a mother who buried both her sons, one to a disease so rare it barely has a name, the other to AIDS during the cruelest years of the epidemic. A woman who sold her child's life story for $15,000, most of which went to her dying son's medical bills. A woman who lived exactly the way she wanted, consequences be damned, and loved her children with a ferocity that made up for every single mistake she ever made. And the screenwriter who told their story said it best. Anna Hamilton Phelan described Rusty in a single line. This was not the PTA Mother of the Year, but she was the perfect mother for Rocky. And she was. God help anyone who says otherwise. She was. Rocky lived 16 years, but in that short time, he showed the world what it means to defy limits, to embrace life even when it's breaking you from the inside out. Rusty didn't shield him from the pain. She amplified the joy. She made sure the story wasn't just about the disease, but about the life lived between the heartbeats. And now I have to ask you, when the world tries to define what's possible, what would you refuse to let it take from you? The story doesn't end here. The next chapter is waiting, and it's one that might just change the way you see what it means to truly live.